Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, tracking political awareness and participation under the multi-party dispensation. What are the findings of a new report that has just been launched? Today, the NRM has marked 26 years in power, an opportunity for Ugandans to reflect on a number of issues that are critical to the country today. One of the key issues that the liberation was supposed to bring about is political awareness and participation, especially by groups which were seen to be marginalized before. Proponents of good governance and human rights have often argued that these values cannot be realized if the populace is ignorant about their political rights and cannot effectively engage in the process of deciding how they can be governed. Yesterday, the Platform for Labor Action, an organization working towards ensuring democracy and social justice, released a report following a study conducted to track the level of political awareness and participation among the women and the youth. The report, entitled Civic and Political Participation of Women and Youth in the Informal Sector in Uganda, a baseline study on the multi-party dispensation in Uganda, looks at the current multi-party system in the country and if at all it has enhanced the participation of all Ugandans. Its findings and recommendations will form the basis of our discussion tonight as we seek to understand the factors hampering the participation of women and the youth in politics. Our guests tonight, Mr. Isaac Arinaitwe, Program Officer, Networking and Community Development at the Platform for Labor Action. You're most welcome, Mr. Arinaitwe.
Thank you, sir.
We are also joined by Ms. Sharon Muhwezi, Program Officer in charge of Child Labor Department at the same organization, Platform for Labor Action. You're most welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Ms. Rita Aciiro, Chairperson of the Uganda Women's Network. Mrs. Rita Aciiro, Chairperson of the Uganda Women's Network, or UWONET. You're most welcome, Rita.
Thank you, Edmond, and good evening, listeners. I'm not the chairperson, I'm the Executive Director of UWONET.
Executive Director of UWONET. Pardon me. Isaac, yesterday you released a report, this report titled Civic and Political Participation of Women and Youth in the Informal Sector in Uganda. Can you begin by telling us the reasons for this research and what you want to achieve with the data you have generated?
Okay, thank you very much. Realizing that Platform for Labor Action has been working with informal sector workers for a quite number of years, and under different issues, HIV, AIDS, labor issues. We also felt there was a need to realize their participation in civic and political participation. And basically, the reason of this study, it was undertaken as part of the initial activities of the project on promoting civic and political participation of women and youth in the informal sector. But the overall objective of the project was to establish the level of civic and political participation and awareness of women and informal sector in Uganda, because we felt if we realized this, then it would inform the way we would work with them in promoting their civic and political rights. And we also thought that it would also provide a benchmark data on the participation of women and youth, and this would also contribute in helping us work closely with them. For a long time, there has been really a dearth of information on civic and political participation of women and informal sector workers. So we had a project that was based in northern Uganda and eastern Uganda, also entitled Promoting Civic and Political Participation of Women and Youth in Informal Sector, and we felt that the feedback that we would get out of this research would help us to work closely with informal sector workers, and at the same time help us work closely with the government and our other civil society organizations in ensuring that women and youth in informal sector work are not really particularly concentrating on their work, but are also actively participating in political issues and civic responsibilities for the good of our country.
Can you give us an outline of the methods that you use? Where did you go? Whom did you talk to? For how long?
Okay, thank you so much. This study was conducted in 5 districts of Uganda. We had 2 districts in northern Uganda, one being Amarat and Dokoro, We also had in Eastern Uganda we had Bugiri, Kariro, Iganga, and Bugiri, Kariro, Iganga. And one of the actual reasons that made us focus on those two areas was that from the market survey conducted, I think, in 2008, 2003, the highest percentage of informal sector workers in Uganda was identified as NorthernUganda. The second, Central Uganda, and the third, Eastern Uganda, then the last one, Western Uganda, with 12%. So we felt that if we did research in Northern Uganda and Eastern Uganda, then we would be representing the views of the majority of informal sector workers. The methods that we used while carrying out this research involved both quantitative and the qualitative methods. And under quantitative, we had focused group discussions. We had questionnaires. We visited those districts I've talked about. Yes. And we were
giving questionnaires.
Yeah, we're giving out questionnaires, and then we knew, first, from these questionnaires we would be able to get feedback out. We also did focus group discussions, especially with focus group discussions with informal sector workers. Then we also had key informants interviews, for example, political leaders, district leaders, and community leaders, local leaders. Those are some of the methodologies we used, and we also had actually feedback workshops, so what we can call validation meetings. This one, whereby after conducting the research, you go back to the community and share with the community information that came out of the research, and of course from there we have many of them contributing to the discussion and saying, maybe here this should have been like this, right. Or you've got this, but for us the cause of this is this. So you also get more information to beef up the data.
All right. Rita, is this something the government takes seriously, women and youth in the informal sector, or is it an esoteric thing left to civil society?
Edmond, first and foremost, I'd like to thank Platform for Labor Action for undertaking this research. As you know, that the majority of our people in this country are in the informal sector, and therefore the decisions that we make as leaders in this country affect them most. So I think such a study is very, very important to bring out really the status at that level, so that decisions that are made to benefit them. But also to find out whether their level of civic awareness is really important for this country. They are the majority of voters first and foremost. So their level of civic awareness and engagement is very, very important. And I think this study is really timely for us to do that, especially in the informal sector. When we talk about the informal sector, we are talking about people doing small businesses. These are the people who actually keep us going on a day-to-day basis. There's women in the market selling matoke, tomatoes, selling marua. That is the informal sector, and that's where the majority of our people are. Whether government is committed to promoting this or not, I think as women we must acknowledge the fact that we have made progress in leadership, particularly leadership in politics. If I could even qualify by saying party politics, because by our constitution, women have the right to participate in politics first and foremost. We have 30% representation by law at the lowest level, including parliament, and we have now gone above that. Both at parliament right now, we're almost at 33%. At the lower levels, we're almost at 50%. That is a good move. However, the quality of the leadership is what actually is very, very crucial. And whether the numbers are translating into improving lives of women and men in this country for gender equality is another question. Government did its part by putting the laws in place, first by ratifying the international conventions and domesticating those conventions into our local laws. I think that is the first step. The other step is, of course, providing space for women to participate. In the last 26 years, as we celebrate Liberation Day today, in the last 26 years, women have made huge progress in terms of leadership. Although, as we take deeper analysis, we are looking at women's participation in leadership only in party politics. If women's leadership potentials and influence should be felt in this country, the leadership should be at different levels, including the informal sector. Leadership should be felt in the civil service, leadership should be felt in the private sector, the women's leadership should be felt in civil society, leadership should be felt in the different aspects of society. But if we concentrate women's leadership and political participation only in party politics, then we'll lose the point and will not feel women's participation. And actually that might not translate into empowering the majority of women, because if you look at the women in parliament now, there are about 130. We are 51.7% of this population, yes. And you have 130 women in parliament. Is that representative enough? Is that going to translate into actual beneficial meaning for women in their lives, and not including men? So if we want to make real meaning in leadership for women, it should be beyond party politics. It should be leadership in civil society. How many PSS do we have? How many undersecretaries do we have? How many ministers do we have? It should be women in the forces. How many in the armed forces? Yeah, in the forces, in the army, in the police, in the prisons. Doctors, how many doctors do we have? Teachers, how many head teachers do we have? How many? You know, that is when we'll start feeling women's leadership at different levels. As of now, I think we've over-concentrated as a country looking at women's participation only in party politics. However, there's been progress at all levels. In civil society, where I belong, women actually...
You have good numbers there.
We have good numbers, and actually civil society for a very long time survived on women's efforts. All the activism, the human rights activism in this country was led by women for a very, very long time. And that is the type of leadership we're talking about. And once we see women participating, including in the informal sector, then we'll start saying, yes, we're making progress. As of now, I think we've made 3 steps forward and 2 steps backwards.
So we've made 1 step.
Yes.
Half a look. Well, talk to us about the quality of leadership. You said that the quality of leadership is not good enough. You have 33% in parliament, 50% at the lower levels. What is the next point of reference with regard to the quality of the leadership there?
Of course, Edmond, it was a strategy, and I think which was a very good strategy by our government to first get women into the leadership position.
Yes.
In numbers. That was a very good strategy.
Yes.
But as we move, as we progress, we need to start looking at quality and deliverables. Having 130 women in parliament, for example, or having 50% of local councils in this country being women, what does that translate into? So we want to start tagging the numbers to quality and deliverables, and how that then means for the local woman, for the common woman, and for the men of this country. We're talking about gender equality. And if we talk about gender equality, we need to talk about women who think about women, women who think about men, to bridge that gender gap.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio, and tonight, tracking political awareness and participation under the multi-party dispensation. What are the findings of a new report that has just been launched? We have guests from the Platform for Labour Action, Mr. Isaac Arinaitwe, Program Officer, Networking and Community Development at that organization, Ms. Sharon Muhwezi, Program Officer in charge of the Child Labour Department, and Mrs. Rita Aciiro, Executive Director of UWONET. You'll be able to call in at some stage and contribute to this discussion. Sharon, talk to us about some of the findings of this report. Did you find that people are aware of their rights as you carried out this research?
Thank you, Edmond. Unfortunately, no. We found out that in the informal sector, women and youth are not widely aware of their responsibilities and of their rights. before I talk about some of the reasons why they are not, some of the key outstanding findings we found were that, for example, 98% of respondents could not explain what participation in politics means exactly, especially for them in the informal sector. What does it mean for a food seller? What does it mean for a cobbler to take up their civic responsibilities? 93% of them lacked full knowledge of what a democratic government is. What does it mean when Uganda says it's a democracy? What does it mean that Uganda has shifted from just having the movement party to having a multi-party system? How do you take part in politics as a member of your party? They did not have knowledge of that at all. And then only 4.3% had full knowledge of the concept of decision making. So how do you make your decision while voting, for example, is the simplest. Do you base it on who gives you plastic plates in the village, or do you listen at the rally and sieve out what's important and that will affect your life, and so decide you're voting on that? Apart from having a skewed idea of what to choose, they didn't even understand just the concept of I'm making a decision while casting a vote, as opposed to acting on impulse. Over 50% lacks awareness about youth councils, and so their lack of awareness that they even exist means they rarely use them, or they rarely think that they have platform in those meetings. And 60% of informal sector respondents are unaware of their parish development committees.
Parish development committees?
Yes.
They don't know they exist.
They don't know they exist, and some who do know it at a distance. They don't attend the budget meetings, or they don't contribute, or they don't look for ways to get involved. It's something they know exists, but it's up there. It's not accessible.
Right.
And some of them absolutely do not know. And then we looked at whether women and female youths knew about the women's councils that exist, and we found that awareness of that was high. Compared to everything else. 73% of those women knew that they had women councils in their village, although more than half could not fully explain how they work and what their exact purpose is in the village. And then lastly, we looked at whether they knew about the committees for persons with disabilities, and found that at community level the awareness was low, both in knowing whether they exist at all and what they do and how these people can participate. They did not know. And another alarming thing we found is that even if this study was carried out in 2011, right before elections, we found that the government did not have many programs within the villages to make people aware of what are these elections. They are coming up, where the rallies, where the candidates. We have a multi-party system. How do you participate? People, they are not told, they are not taught. There is no positive mobilization that is objective to enable them to take part fully as citizens of Uganda. So those were some of the gaps we found.
And back again to your study, how representative was it? You went to the north, you went to the east. Does it represent the rest of the country?
So we tried to, in terms of representation, as Isaac mentioned, since over 60% of Uganda's informal sector workers are in the north and in the east, and only 12% are in the west, for example, we found that in terms of numbers, getting those in the north and the east would be representative of a lot of informal sector workers.
Yes.
Yeah, not so much the rest of the population in the country, but youth and women in the informal sector.
All right, and Isaac, can you talk to us about how you move from here? You've done the study, you've got your findings. Where do we go next?
All right, thank you so much. Part of our responsibilities as civil society organizations aiming at ensuring democracy and good governance is ensuring that every person in the community is aware about their rights, about their civic and political responsibilities. This information is very, very important for us, and I know even for the rest of the civil society organization and even the government. So we believe with this information, it has informed, how do we go out there and work with informal sector workers? How do we call on board other civil society organizations to come, and we become a very big mass of people to help other informal sector workers, even bringing on board the government. So this has helped us so far. this research also actually in its recommendations, it also tries to give us information on what we can do to deal with informal sector workers, to educate informal sector workers very well, or to ensure that what we are doing, our sensitizations, become of help. For example, we realized that, this research realizes that the nature of the work of informal sector workers might not allow them to easily participate in civic and political participation on the civic and political duties. For example, when we talk of these women who are selling tomatoes in the market, we have someone who has a small shop somewhere and it's a sole source of living. One of the challenges they faced was, telling these kinds of people, you know what, close your shop for 30 minutes and go and listen to a political rally. Here people are discussing their manifestos. It is one of the forums you're going to use to choose, which leader can work for you. So, but the people would tell you, if I close my shop for 30 minutes,
I'm losing business.
Yeah, where will I get supper? So we realized now, if we are reaching out to these people, we need to reach them at their places of work. Right. So we'll share some of this information with our fellow organizations that have really interest in seeing democracy improve in Uganda and civic and political participation improve in Uganda. And then we believe this information will help us engage the government even on putting on good policies that can bring on board, all Ugandans to participate actively in affairs that affect them. So really that is what we see as the main purpose, the main benefit that we have gotten from this research.
All right, and Rita, do you think, does the nature of politics matter? Multi-party movement, does it really matter? What are the dynamics in there?
Yes, the nature of politics matters, and I think multi-party politics is a good concept. It gives freedom of association, freedom of expression. You can, like you see our politicians moving from one party, when they feel oppressed here, they move to another. That's if we were not in a multi-party politics, that wouldn't be happening. So I think the multi-party politics is very, very important. And I think the issue he's raised, the research team has raised about information is very, very critical for this country, which we need to take very seriously. If we are going to talk about a democratic country, it's not going to be the government alone to deliver on that. It is all of us as citizens of this country. The issues of rights goes with responsibilities. You can't claim rights without responsibilities. And part of our responsibility is to participate in the governance of the country. A part of our responsibility is to participate in electing the type of leadership we want and offering ourselves for leadership.
Right.
So we cannot keep on complaining that this is a bad government or this is, unless we are part of the governance.
Yeah.
So that is very, very crucial. And for people to have that information and knowledge, the knowledge base of knowing that it is actually a duty for me to ensure that I participate in the governance process. The example he gave, somebody says if I close my shop for 30 minutes, then I lose business, which is true. We haven't reached a level where we really appreciate participation in the democratic governance system in our country. We are looking at survival. We do not see what it means to have, for example, a Rita in leadership. What would that mean? Having, for example, a Rita in leadership. We haven't reached the level of analysis. No, the level of analysis, the type of leaders we want.
Right.
Having an Edmond, what does that mean? Is he the best person for us? Or I will continue selling my tomatoes. When it comes to vote, I'll vote Edmond or Alex or whoever. So we have to reach a level of saying, when I vote an Edmond, or Edmond for that matter,
this is what I get.
This is what I get, or this is what I lose.
Right.
We haven't reached there. So we're still grappling with day-to-day survival. level. And we have distanced ourselves from the governance of the country.
Right.
We look at, government as a structure, something that belongs to a few people, not to all of us. That is our challenge. And that challenge is basically from what he has just raised, the issue of information, the issue of appreciating that actually I have to participate in the governance of our country.
This is Spectrum on Radio 1. We're going for a break. We'll be back.
Do you know that by consuming Ugandan-made quality products, we create more jobs and encourage further investments? That's why Private Sector Foundation Uganda, together with Uganda Manufacturers Association, has organized a grand back-to-school exhibition to showcase Ugandan-made products. The back-to-school exhibition will take place from the 26th to the 29th of January 2012 at Uma Showgrounds, Lugogo. Are you a parent, guardian, head teacher, trader? Don't miss to buy Ugandan-made quality products for your children and students as they go back to school. All products will be at wholesale price. Entrance is free for all with lots of local entertainment. For details, call 755-291-035 or come to PSFU offices on Plot 43, Nakasero Road.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum. Tonight, tracking political awareness and participation under the multi-party dispensation. What are the findings of a new report that has just been launched? Our guests, Mr. Isaac Arinaitwe, Program Officer, Networking and Community Development at the Platform for Labor Action, that's an NGO. We also have Ms. Sharon Muhwezi, Program Officer in charge of Child Labor Department at the same organization, and Mrs. Rita Aciiro, Executive Director of UWONET, that's the Uganda Women's Network. You'll be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Sharon, let's talk about this apathy, why these people, women in the informal sector and youth don't want to take part in politics. To what extent is it a problem?
It is a huge problem. We've talked about the numbers. We've talked about how over 90% of these people do not understand these concepts and are also not very involved, and only 12% of them have said they have ever contested for a place in politics at the lower levels, the LCs or the parish development committees, or taken part in the budget process. They gave several reasons. I wouldn't say they don't want. That's not 100% why they don't participate, but there is a lot of inhibitions. The very first one, he mentioned it, the nature of their business. Their businesses are small. These are self-employed. Him being at a rally means the business is not moving. And sometimes him going for a demonstration, participating in walk to work, means the family has no supper that day. This is because when we talk about informal sector workers also, listeners should imagine that small businesses, self-employed, have no access to credit or other financial services. The people usually have low capital. They are mobile, and then they can also, it's one of those businesses that can easily come up or easily fall. So that's the nature. Not,
the
it's
nature
not
of business
certain.
can come. What did you just say?
They have small capital, so it
Right.
could be easy to start, but it could also be destroyed from
Very
a demonstration in town. Yeah, if they pass by and overturn your newspaper stall, that could be it. If you go them on loan.
Edmond, if I could just come in from what Sharon has said,
Yeah.
while the women do not want to offer themselves for leadership, they are the majority of voters.
Yes.
So the question then is, if they are not participating or offering themselves in these positions,
Yes.
because they do not understand what it means or what it takes to be a leader, then we need to also question whether the people they vote are actually the right people.
Yes.
Because, so that is a big question. I mean, they can vote anybody, but they can't offer themselves. So that is a very critical question that we need to, and because I mean, then they could, an Edmond of Radio 1 offers himself because he can buy everybody a bottle of beer, then they'll say, yeah, our man, but they cannot offer themselves. And whether that person offering themselves is the good choice, they can't analyze that.
Right.
So that is a problem we're having with leadership. If we do not go back to the majority who are in the informal sector to educate them what it means, one, to be in leadership, two, to vote for the right person.
Right. Isaac, I would like you to talk to us about who exactly we're talking about, the informal sector, but before we do that, Sharon, how do you overcome that apathy?
Those are things we talked about in our recommendations. So far, what PLA has done, for example, is to educate peer educators who will then go on to educate fellow informal sector workers.
Peer education.
Yes. So we have peer educators in the villages.
Right.
And then also starting to design programs that target the reasons why they are inhibited from participating. Apart from that, there is low self-esteem for the youth, and then lack of self-confidence for the women. It's a patriarchal society. Many men will not stand their women being on the LC Council. That's a huge problem in the villages. We may not see it a lot. In Kampala, it's probably not at the forefront. In the villages, it is. Or leaving home, instead of turning to the children, telling your husband you're going to the budget committee meeting. The men don't understand why you would go there, and some are afraid. If you get so much power, you may change, the status quo in the house. Yeah, that's a huge problem for women. So having programs that specifically target those. Education, increasing education levels. Many, even if they wanted to participate, actually do not qualify in terms of education. They don't have the advanced certificate of Uganda. Some have not reached S4. So when they go through the list of what it takes to contest, they do not meet the qualifications. So the informal sector workers still face such problems. Targeting them specifically. Education, the government boosting their programs that they have. They don't have that many on the grassroots level, to increase awareness and starting to put to insert the civic responsibilities and participation information in all the information that goes around. Sometimes I would say mandatory, for example, in class, to start to insert those topics in there. I think would be a good way to spread the information.
All right. And Isaac, who exactly are these people? They would sound like the biggest voting bloc, women and youth in the informal sector. Who exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, when we talk of the word informal sector or informal sector workers, the informal sector economy involves these businesses that are normally characterized by absence of financial accounts, having less than 5 employers.
5 employees?
Yeah, employees rather.
Yes.
Having no fixed location, and in most cases being unregistered, and sometimes they have a short lifespan. Maybe that is the definition I would give for informal sector. But for the category of informal sector workers that we are really, researching about, okay, this involved really these ones with small businesses. We considered food sellers, non-food sellers, those who sell clothes, we considered digging groups, we considered urban farmers, people, when someone staying in maybe a town but maybe has piggery or poultry. We considered soft manufacturers.
Manufacturers?
Yeah, those people who make mats.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, basically crafts. Yeah, crafts, mats, pots and so forth.
Right.
It's those people at the grassroots really there in the communities we are looking at. Of course, from the informal sector world, again, we have other people like in Kampala here who have big businesses, who have and are self-employed and are doing well. But we're basically looking at those people, those women and youth in that category I've talked about. We also considered actually hard manufacturers, these welders, these people who make coffins.
Right.
So that's where
carpenters.
Yeah, carpenters. This research.
Roadside carpenters most times.
Yes, please. So it rotated about all those people.
Rita, we know that the Electoral Commission, the Human Rights Commission, are supposed to carry out civic education. Why are they not doing this?
Edmond, you're asking the question to the wrong person. I don't
You
work.
observe them, you're supposed to demand accountability.
Yes, I don't work in Electoral Commission, neither do I work with Uganda Human Rights Commission, but I know it is their mandate to carry out civic education, which most times we confuse with voter education.
Yes.
And
Civic education talks about rights.
it talks about rights, and
Voter education is going to cast a verse.
yeah, it talks about rights and obligations. That is civic education, and that goes back to the core of governance and democratization, what it means. And the Human Rights Commission is also mandated to do the same.
Correct.
Why they do not do that? Of course, over the years, I've had the privilege to associate with the different institutions. One of the things that they've really complained about is the budgetary allocation. Recently, I had the chair.
Small amount.
Yeah, very small amounts, and many times it comes very close to the elections, and that also contributes to our perception that actually civic education is voter
education.
Civic education is supposed to be continuous. I remember in our younger days of primary, we used to have civics, which was part of our curriculum. That is actually civic education. It talks about your rights and your obligations. So it's yes, while it's a mandate of the Electoral Commission, I think we need to find other avenues of doing civic education and not leaving it alone to Electoral Commission that is funded by government. And I think what Sharon was talking about here is their contribution to civic education, forming the peer education, peer groups. That is part of civic education. As civil society organizations, we have endeavored to do civic education about your rights, about your obligations, about asking the right questions to the duty bearers, about knowing what is due to you and what your responsibility is in the governance process. So I think the main reason, going back to your question, to the different institutions, at least I know for Electoral Commission, they have been very clear on this. The budgetary allocation has been their challenge.
Budgets, I mean, the money comes very close to the actual voting.
It comes close to the voting, but it's also very limited. It's very limited to reach out to the populace that we have right now, and then also coming out with the different strategies of communication. For example, communicating to the people in the informal sector. How do you get to them? They're in the markets. They go very early.
The format of presentation.
Yes, the format of presentation. Is it a radio program? Is it a one-to-one? Is it newspaper?
Brochures.
Is it brochures? You know, all that takes a lot of time and resources. So it needs a strategy that's clearly developed. It needs funding that is, sustainable over time. But also it needs ways, not only through the Electoral Commission, the education system. We need to look at that. Civil society is trying to do, but they are equally handcuffed, just like the Electoral Commission, and they reach very few places. Like you see, these people just went to five.
Went to the north.
They went to 5 districts, right?
100 plus. The last time I counted, I don't even remember that.
I think we are about 126 or 20 something. At least not less than 120. So you see that limitation. Even if the Electoral Commission went to do civic education, which district, how, and when, and all those are big questions that we need to put in place. And I think as stakeholders in this, we need to come together.
All right, Isaac, as you contribute, you supplement that question. The current multi-party system, does it make a difference whether it's movement or multi-party? Do we get a better deal on either side?
Yeah, we really do get a better deal. Only that, we really need to go back. We really need to do a lot of sensitization on multi-party politics. You see, multi-party politics is better than one-party, system.
It's a better
because the community, the people, the citizens of the country, as the executive director had said, they have a variety of choices.
I mean, the executive director of UWONET, not one of the systems.
Yeah, of UWONET, yes. Yeah. With the multi-party politics provides citizens with opportunities to choose really, leaders, because it gives them, a wide source of many leaders in place, and they have to just choose whom they feel, can. But you see, with Uganda, our people don't know about this.
Yes.
When we were in the field conducting this study, the majority of informal sector workers, they really said they had never seen any person from the Electoral Commission moving in their communities, like sensitizing them about what multi-party is all about and what voting is all about. The only information they would have got would be through radios and TVs. But they complain that, TVs are in the city. Radios, sometimes during, maybe when those radio programs are supposed to be on, we are at work, maybe. So,
but you can still carry your radio to your workplace.
Yeah, and of course...
Edmond, how many people can afford radios in this country? Let alone the women. When the men go to dig, or they are going to the trading center...
They carry the radio.
No, they might leave the radio, but carry the cells.
Oh, why would they carry the cells with them?
Sharon talked about patriarchy.
When they come back.
Sharon talked about patriarchy. What it means.
He might come back and find they've been run down.
Yes. Exactly.
You can't listen to his program.
Exactly.
There was also a problem, by the way, of household power relations.
Go on.
How do you touch my radio?
Oh.
Those kinds of issues. Yes. A woman says,
you need a cheat to touch them.
Do you know what? I want to go and vote. No, you are not supposed to go and vote. Stay. When we would ask them, why didn't you vote in 2006?
The man said.
Yeah, the man said, I was supposed to take care of the cassava. No going to vote, you see. Those kinds of issues.
How about choice of the candidate? Does it feature?
Then that's one, a lot of issues actually.
Vote for FDC, there's a problem.
Yeah, many.
Not only FDC, if you don't vote for your husband's candidate, regardless whether your that candidate's FDC, UPC, NRM, it has to be your husband's candidate.
Yeah.
But it's easier these days. In the past, when they started these things of elections, they used to line up behind men. So if your man is standing there and he looks behind him and the wind is blowing, there's no one behind him, there'll be a problem. These days it's secret. How would you know?
I'm glad that stopped. But I'm telling you, Edmond, Isaac has just talked about power relations. You don't know how much that means to a woman in a household. It's like, how we believe in God. At times, even in darkness, you think God is watching. That is how
God is watching.
Exactly. That is how power and gender has worked on women.
You imagine that you have
her conscience,
both.
Exactly. Even her conscience will tell her, or she will think that the man has actually seen her taking her own
the
candidate.
Wrong person.
No, when we go to the communities educating women, and you tell them it's a secret ballot, you have the right to go put your thumbprint or tick a candidate of your choice. Said, no, but my husband told the whole household should vote like this. Said, no, but nobody will know.
Yes.
And, they look surprised that actually, oh, you mean when I do that, nobody will know?
She might get home and mention it in an unguarded moment.
Exactly.
She might say, my candidate, and the husband is listening. And it changes everything. The mood changes.
Yeah.
All right, Sharon, talk to us about this apathy. When the people don't vote the way they're supposed to vote, what are the end results?
So Rita touched on it very briefly. So looking at a recent discussion, people asked me, why do you care about informal sector workers? Why do you care about women? Why are you targeting them? Apart from the fact that Rita has already said they make up over 50% of Uganda's population. So because there are many, that makes them the majority of the voting bloc. And when they don't show up, so the general apathy we have, whether it's for men or women, or whether it's for youth or husbands and wives, it means people don't. I think Uganda is we are famous for not voting. There is a lot of chaos on the streets. Hey, my candidate. I think a small number of people actually do show up compared to how many would go, and I think that's one of the results of apathy, of people generally feeling, because they don't think about politics, they think it doesn't affect them.
Why? I mean, if they are out on the streets, then they should be out.
Actually, Edmond, I think that's a misconception that when people demonstrate on these streets, we think they are being politically active.
Yes, or that they are thinking about it.
Some of them, just...
They say, we want this man or woman, whether you will die, we die.
They just join the crowd, without even knowing what this is going to end into. And when it comes to the actual thinking of who to vote for, why you should vote for... It's another matter. It's another matter.
They go home.
Or whether they show up and line up for a day. And you could say that the ones in Kampala, they look at, the crowd passing and yelling, and they could ask why. Well, the ones in the villages don't see demonstrations that much. That means they don't even get to ask. If there is walk to work, many people don't even get to know about it because they are not in Kampala. Their stall wasn't overturned, or they didn't hear noise outside, or they're not wondering why no one bought anything today. So at the end, after so much time of all that only happening in the city, a lot of people outside are left out. And what we lose, we end up with governments and leaders that are not representative of what people would want. The informal sector is huge. I'm sure they have feelings about their businesses, about the economy, about politics, but those are not represented. We end up with leaders that have only appealed to the few that vote, most of whom are elites. So and whose needs,
democracy for the elites.
Yes, and whose views may not, represent the views of a digging group in Amolata or a mother that stays at home.
Kind of animal farm democracy.
Yeah, kind of.
I think I want to disagree with Sharon on that bit.
Yes.
These people actually are the majority of the voters.
That's true. Women and
men.
Yeah,
why they vote particular people is the issue of whether the person they are voting is a person of their choice by conviction, or it's a person of choice because this person is appealing, he comes from this family, has this amount of money, is able to give me a bar of soap. That level is where we really need to go to. It's not because they do not participate.
Let's hear
but
from Alice. I would like us to start with that point. First of all, let's hear from our listeners. This is Spectrum on numbers 0414-348111, 031-226-0390, and 031-226-1390. But Rita, of course, it's a double-edged sword. They don't want to vote, and though the few who vote badly, so to speak.
You might call it badly. I want to say that they vote from an informed perspective.
Uninformed.
They are not well informed. Their choices are not informed by the conviction that this is the right person because of principles, because of leadership skills, because of what this person is to deliver on. Their yardstick of a leader is based on their day-to-day survival.
Yes. And I'd like Isaac tell us what some of the people told us.
Yeah, what she's saying is true.
Yes.
Because from the findings, would ask why did you, for example, vote this leader?
Yes.
Why did you support the party you supported?
Danced very well on the podium.
Actually.
Or he sang in a good voice.
No,
she's beautiful. You tell the women.
The man is handsome. And for me, these are the issues the research is bringing on board, and we need to go back and sensitize the community that leaders is not about being handsome, it's not about the money and so forth. And actually, most of the informal sector workers would tell us that they voted some leaders because they gave them salt. So we really need to go back and talk about demonize these things so much and ensure that
demonize them. Putting salt on the table for a village is a big deal.
No.
You want more salt in the long run than just the salt of one day. Somebody gives you salt today and you never see that person ever again.
He's paid you already. It's quid pro quo.
Exactly.
And can I tell you something?
Yeah.
After we have so far gone implementing the findings of this research, we have done this in Iganga, Kariro, Bujirido, Koranda, Marata.
Yes.
Well, I can assure you that informal sector workers really have gone out and engaged their leaders now.
Yes, after you've spoken.
Yes, now they are asking for accountability. They have been meeting their even national leaders, MPs and local leaders, and asking them, you are supposed to do, we as informal sector workers, we know you're supposed to be doing this for us. We're supposed to be receiving benefits from the development programs in our communities. We hear there is NADS, but we as informal sector workers, we have never who from here has ever. And then you find the leader saying, okay, we are sorry. They're saying we are supposed to do this, we are not seeing anything. What's the problem? At least they started now engaging leaders.
Spectrum, hello? Hello, you're live on Spectrum, your name?
Hello?
Hello, sir, your name?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, your name?
Is that Spectrum?
Yes, this is Spectrum, your name?
Okay, I can hardly hear you here.
We can hear you loud and clear, your name?
Okay, I just want to make a comment. Thank you for the program, and I was just thinking that 90% of our country is not being very adept to the whole thing of democracy and all that. I was thinking, aren't we wasting a lot of money and time in the whole thing? Expecting to be running as like a first world country. Most of these systems and things that we're doing are coming to us from outside, and to the extent that even now many of our leaders in Africa are being tried outside. We are receiving things, and yet back at home we run very differently. I am a Uganda, and I know that you don't elect the king. We we even in our systems around us, we live very simply. And here we are trying to emulate the West, the Western world. I think it's putting us into bondage, making us waste a lot of money. And that's not good for us as Ugandans, maybe even for Africa. I think we're wasting a lot of time chasing what I call this democratic ideal. I think we should find our own way of running our society. Most of these things are sponsored. Even I'm sure many of those the societies those people are part of are sponsored from outside. They're not even sponsored from within. So that's my contribution. My name is Peter.
Well, that's a very interesting view. Rita, I would like you to take it on. Should we have the Sava Nyalas running things for us? Forget about, we can't even hold LC1 elections. It's too expensive. The EC says so. We should have more kings and...
Thank you, Peter, for that school of thought. Whether we should have a Sava Nyala or Kabaka or a Ruot, where I come from, that is a huge debate for us as a country, but also for Africa, as you suggested. We shouldn't lose sight that we are part of a global village. And yes, democracy, we've signed to it, unless we are going to tell the UN that we no longer want to be part of this system and we are going to start our own system. This is something as a country that we can debate, but it's a good thought of school. I think I can't say that I can totally agree with Peter whether we should, because we are also divided as a country. We have so many ethnic groupings in this country. We have so many tribes. We are divided along.
We can invent kings where they don't have them.
We can, okay, where we don't have kings, we can invent them. But how many are you going to invent? We are divided along religious lines, along cultural lines, tribal lines. Now we're even going to clans, and how to get that together might take us a little bit longer than the democracy trend that we're trying to follow. But of course, democracy doesn't come cheap. It has never come cheap in any country.
So, but we can't hold LC1 elections because we don't have the money for it. Maybe we even buy them bicycles.
Maybe we just need to review that. Probably we don't need LC1 elections, and we start maybe from LC3 system.
But that's the root of democracy. How do you get them into office?
We can find
the chairman's son becomes the successor to the father, or what? How do you do it? Because that's an excellent system. When you have
it's an excellent system, but we must find ways of cutting costs if that's what we need to do.
Isaac,
for me, for the time I have spent in doing real development, community work, I really still concur with democracy, because I have seen
one man, one vote.
Yeah, I have seen because someone is saying that what we are trying to say maybe is sponsored and something, it is not relevant to the country. But really, because before the call came, I was telling you that now I witnessed, okay, informal sector workers making their leaders accountable. So it's for the time they have been in power.
Yes.
Do you think if these kinds of sensitizations had not been done, would they have been able to get that opportunity? Really, we are seeing there is something good coming up. Why don't we encourage ourselves? Why don't we have hope? Encourage ourselves, encourage the government, encourage the Electoral Commission, the Human Rights Commission, our fellow civil societies, organizations. We move ahead and continue sensitizing, and we see what would be the outcome in 10 years.
I think as civil society, that is our passion.
Yes.
That we want to empower our society, we want them to know their rights and obligations. But also, when you look at our leaders, they get frightened when people like Isaac, like me.
Why do they get frightened?
Because you're telling people that actually these leaders have a duty to, they owe you a duty, and holding them accountable. As Isaac says, some of these leaders now think you're a trouble causer because you're trying to, you're waking up the sleeping dog. So that is also something that we need to, leaders need to start appreciating that governance of the people can be easier if these people know what their rights are and what the obligations are. But if you're a leader who wants to do it all the time, and these people are not doing their part, then you get worn out. So we need, as leaders, the leaders need to appreciate, especially our political leaders, need to appreciate that citizens have a responsibility to participate, to ensure that whatever they are doing is for their benefit as leaders first and foremost, but also for the community.
Right.
Unless we see this as a partnership,
it's going to be difficult.
It's going to be difficult, and that's where we get loggerhead. We start accusing each other. Isaac is a spoiler in my village. What are you doing here? And things like that. But I think it's a partnership. We're in it together. We want this country to develop.
All right. Maybe as we go, Sharon. So it's basically working. When you talk to people, they wake up.
Yes, and I would like to agree with both of them and disagree with Peter and say maybe he shouldn't lose sight of the morals and principles behind this education. It's not so much that we're choosing democracy right now. I think Uganda is pretty much already on the track for it. It is as it exists, our people having their say. Right. Rita has already said the informal sector make the bigger proportion in the bloc, but can that proportion grow bigger so as to represent them well? Can they analyze it through a sensible lens as opposed to who gave me plastic plates? I think while the system exists, because it already does, it's not that we're trying to introduce it. Can people have their freedom? Can they have their say? Can they hold their leaders accountable? I think that's what's important.
Well, thank you very much, dear guest, Mr. Isaac Arinaitwe, Program Officer, Networking and Community Development at the PLA. PLA is the Platform for Labor Action. Thank you for coming to Spectrum. Sharon Muhwezi, Program Officer, Child Labor Department at the PLA. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Rita Aciiro, Executive Director of UWONET, that's the Uganda Women's Network. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Edmond. I just want to conclude by saying that women's leadership will only make meaning if women are participating at all levels and in all sectors in leadership positions.
Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English. Do stay tuned.
All over the world looking for fruits from the finest lands.